morning, everyone. That is a very difficult act to follow, but I will do my best. It's been a pleasure working with David and Norman on 425 Park. It's an extraordinary addition to our city. I'm here to moderate our next panel, which is really very much about the future of New York. And what each panelist who will come up in a moment has been asked to do is to spend a couple of minutes talking about what they really see as the future of planning, design, construction in New York City, and how that future could make us a more competitive city vis-a-vis London, vis-a-vis Tokyo, vis-a-vis all the cities that are growing around the world and are our friendly competitors. If I could actually, so we're each going to do a 2-minute presentation. I'm going to start with mine since I'm already standing here. If I could have my first slide, please. So Vin, if there is the most popular slide of the, I mean, as everyone knows, Vin runs a very tight ship, so we all had to submit these slides several days ago, and yet it's extraordinary that we all decided to hone in on this image. It is, including Tony Hiss, and so I'm very proud to stand on Norman and Tony's shoulders in talking about this. So we've been asked to look at the future, and as Norman said yesterday, in order to look to the future, you really have to look back as well. And we had a number of very interesting public space proposals, and from Columbia and Shop's perspective, we wanted to throw ours into the ring, which is this extraordinary promenade between 46th Street up to 57th Street. And as you see in that picture from the 1920s, that was once occupiable parkland. Park Avenue was a park. And so what we'd like to think about a little bit in quite some detail is what that condition is today, which is on the left, and what that condition could be, which is on the right. And I'd like to think about it not just as a series of parks, but really a promenade, something that was connected and becomes an experience, a must-do experience in New York City, like the High Line has become, like Governor's Island has become. We're learning that the future is really about not just creating great public spaces, but great public experiences that both New Yorkers and visitors get to enjoy. That's the existing condition of park, with 3 lanes of traffic, a parking lane, and an 18-foot median. And as you saw in that slide that Norman showed from the 50s, that median was narrowed. We believe we could bring it back. And we actually thought about this in some detail, about the fact that you could take away some traffic lane, yes, and I know people will be concerned about that, but actually put in left turn lanes where you need to put them in, because by my estimation, and of course people would need to analyze this, it's the left turns on Park Avenue that really bollocks up all the traffic. And so if you segregate that traffic and have 2 free-flowing lanes, you could actually have better traffic on Park Avenue. But what you really get, the jewel, is a median that's about 42, 45 feet wide, could continue the great public art tradition that exists on Park Avenue and expand upon it. I'm looking at Susan because I know how much she cares about that. But it means real occupiable spaces. And what's so extraordinary when you think about this is, if you look out this window, there's a traffic circle outside of this window, and I'm always amazed at the fact that there are more people on a nice day in that traffic circle than there are in Central Park in the corner across the street. And that's about great design and making something that's really fantastic. And for us, we really believe that making that fantastic thing had to reinforce that beautiful symmetry of Park Avenue and that relationship to the Helmsley Building. So this is the existing condition. And just my last slide of what that could become, which is something very gracious, and again, a walkway where you could narrow the distance between each of the medians to about 20 feet, so you could very easily walk and have this grand experience. So this is a relatively small idea compared to London Eyes on their sides, but something that's implementable and something that we could experience. And also, I think I gave this crowd Lolo last year, which was an expansion of the harbor into Governor's Island, so I thought something more digestible would be a good thing. So with that, I'm now going to introduce our great panel, Carol Willis, who is the director of the Skyscraper Museum. Do you want to come up one by one? Carol Willis, who's the director of the Skyscraper Museum. Janno Lieber, who is the president of the World Trade Center Development for Silverstein Properties. There's Janno. Jay Badame, who is the president and COO of Tishman and AECOM Construction. Ashok Raiji, who is the principal of the groundbreaking engineering firm, Overip, and the great Paul Selver, a senior land use counsel at Kramer Levin. And so I'm going to start with Carol, and I've also been given the task of keeping time, so we each have a couple of minutes, which I'm sure I've gone over. Right?
What I really want is the slide changer.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. Vishaan has already said what I was going to say to you, look out the window, because that is our topic, the future, 21st century New York. That is both the history and the future of New York, I would maintain. And I think the most important thing I can try to do today as a historian, because that's what I am, is to convince you that New York is not dense. So last night, one of the last sessions, Michael Kimmelman from the New York Times said about the same thing. New York is really not that dense. What you see in this image is a projection of New York, an extrapolation that was published in the New York World on December 30th, 1899. And looking forward into the future of the city, and a city that was growing completely by the laissez-faire energy of capitalism, the projection was a city of towers that expanded high into the air, densely through Manhattan, and was abuzz with technology, future technology, and was taking over the island in a way. Here's my topic, history and density. That created the essential identity of New York, which is arguably a city of towers. New York is many things. But that laissez-faire environment grew together in the places with the highest demand, like here on Wall Street and Broadway and Lower Manhattan, and without controls, crowded in, incredibly dense. The next phase of New York's zoning history, which creates the skyline today, comes in 1916, when the setback regulations were created. And those templates of the setback city, of high-rises that formed as pyramids and created a tall tower above, or allowed for a tall tower above, as on the development axis of 42nd Street that you see in 1930, created the skyline of our kind of essential New York of 1929. Now, Hugh Ferris, my hero, as well as Lord Foster's, imagined back in 1922 that the direction that zoning would naturally take is to overtake a full block and make buildings larger and larger. That actually was not the case, and that is not the nature of New York. Single buildings on single lots is the nature of New York building. And as you can see in this 1931 view with the Empire State Building is the only building of that scale that actually came about in the agglomeration of sites from, that was predicted for the natural evolution of the New York zoning law. And as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, Rockefeller Center is not yet developed. When the worry about the 1916 zoning law brought about the reforms of 1961, this was the projection of how New York would develop. I would argue that it never would have developed this way, but the principal concern of the architects and planners at that time was limiting the amount of space. And what you can see in the white band above each one of the boroughs is that the history of New York zoning has been to damp down development. And so you see the white band is what would have been allowed under 1916. The black band in each of the graphs is what was intended by the down zoning of 1961. In terms of skyscrapers, what we developed was the priority of open space, which was also the premise of the 1961 zoning. And as you can see, Rockefeller Center, as it expanded to the west, developed this tower in the park scenario. So the solution, I think, of vertical density makes the point that density is not an average. And I'm going to illustrate this very quickly through actually a series of exhibitions that we did at the Skyscraper Museum that focused on global cities and compared first Hong Kong and New York, and then later Shanghai. Now, New York, if you take the average density, of Manhattan, it's 70,000 people a square mile. Likewise, Hong Kong, which is the other exemplar of vertical density in the world, has a 70,000 person a square mile average. But this configuration of Hong Kong, the part that's white here is actually water. The open space, the green space, is indeed green space, protected park space, which is unbuildable, and the red is the built area. So as you can see, 1/4 of the entire area of the Hong Kong SAR is built space. 3/4 is unbuilt space, protected space. New York is exactly the opposite. So if we put New York in a global perspective, as we look here at Shanghai, which now has more skyscrapers than New York, as does Hong Kong, we can see that Shanghai builds about 100 years after us on the same model that we saw in New York back in 1900. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Janno, Lieber.
Okay. Good morning. I was at Vishaan asked us to brief and to talk about a little about the futuristic qualities of what we all spend time on. And I've spent the last 9 years trying to rebuild the World Trade Center, so I'm going to focus on that. I think, as many people who are more expert than I in this room know, in New York, we've had a debate for the last 60, 70 plus years with two antithetical versions of what is the good city. And one is the sort of the Jane Jacobs version of low-rise, highly dynamic streetscape, a lot of human interaction at the street level, and neighborhood qualities. And in opposition to that is sort of the Hope modernist way of looking at the world, somewhat towers in a park, the idea that vertical density in combination with space around it somehow would create a version of the good life and a version of the future. And the World Trade Center, the old World Trade Center, pre-9/11, I think in some ways reflected the modernist vision. It was, of course, the streetscape was eliminated for that super block. The two towers sort of sat alone in the plaza. And the retail, which is, the substitute for New York street life, was, of course, underground in a mall-like setting. I think the World Trade Center that we're building now reconciles and creates a synthesis of those different visions. It does it by, taking the advantage of the best aspects of density. The things that make New York great are lots of smart people able to be together and exchange ideas. The shot that you see on before you is a vision down Greenwich Street from Tribeca, which is the ultimate kind of New York low-rise neighborhood with street-level retail, school in the foreground, one of the great public schools of New York City, and low-rise rental housing on the left. And then, of course, you can't see it, but those historic buildings that are what sort of characteristic of Tribeca. And then 7 World Trade Center, a couple blocks south of it, with density, but also the restoration of the streetscape. We've allowed Greenwich Street to come down back through the World Trade Center, allowed Fulton Street, the historic east-west street of that neighborhood, to come back through the Trade Center, to put the World Trade Center back on the grid. And also to create public spaces, great New York public spaces like the Memorial Park, which when the whole park is open, it will enable everybody to use it as a public open space as well as a place of remembrance. The buildings themselves, in addition to having street-level retail, in addition to being back on the grid, have I think that the futuristic qualities are including the fact that they were 7 World Trade Center was the first green office building in New York City. It is served by 11 mass transit lines. This is the most best mass transit served commercial neighborhood in New York. And the buildings themselves are green, high tech. And the workspace, and I think that Lord Foster was talking a little bit about this, is flexible enough to create the kind of workplaces of the future where there's more emphasis on communal spaces and sharing of ideas rather than just private spaces. And the flexibility and the open plan and the lack of columns enables companies to do that. And one final thought, what is futuristic about the World Trade Center? It's where it is. It's not just on the best combination of mass transit. It is most convenient to where the white-collar, creative, professional workforce is moving in New York. As the Downtown Alliance is about to reveal in studies they're putting out in the next week or so, all of the white-collar workforce growth in New York City, especially the young people, is Brooklyn, Lower Manhattan, and near in New Jersey. It's not the northern suburbs anymore. And that means that downtown has an opportunity to become, in addition to the model mixed-use neighborhood, also the model of our new creative workforce and economy. And the diversity of the tenant base as well is at 7 World Trade Center, which is extraordinary, is sort of indicative of that trend. And we're seeing it happening before our eyes. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you and good morning. David Levinson mentioned this morning that owners and developers have to really deal with the headwinds. Well, as the builders, we consider ourselves the tailwinds. We have to push the projects along in a manner that make owners comfortable. We have to bring all the materials into this city. We also have to work with labor to make things user-friendly. So if we can go to the first slide that we have. We are right now rebuilding the World Trade Center. Of course, Janno is one of our special clients downtown with Silverstein Properties. Going back to the original days, Tishman built the World Trade Center for the Port Authority. We built Tower 7 for Silverstein Properties. So to be back there building for both of those entities now is certainly a privilege for us. Looking forward, the things that we see going on in this town are repositioning of old, tired office buildings. How does that happen? We look at recladding the buildings, low-E glass, energy efficient, going from left to right, the work at 1095 Avenue of the Americas to 510 Madison, to, on the right, 1775 Columbus, and to the project on the right, which was a recent award for Tishman, is the repositioning and recladding of 450 West 33rd for Brookfield Properties. But while this screen was being developed, we got a call from Boston Properties to look at 399 Park Avenue and also to look at repositioning and recladding that. Someone that lives in Jersey as myself, we'd love to have left turns. We have to do all those jug handles all the time, and it is really not nice. So I can understand the Park Avenue dilemma. We have to explain to owners why it costs $400 a foot in New York City as opposed to $200 a square foot in Chicago. So how do we do that? The material prices are something that are beyond our control. We don't control the cost of oil, whether it's $100 a barrel or $80 a barrel. But the one thing we can help is to work with labor in this town. There are 120,000 unionized construction workers in New York. And this year, there is $30 billion worth of work that would be put in place, which gets us almost to the record year that we had in 2006. What does that do for everybody? That means prices are going to start to go up. We have created a model with the unions to work with what's called project labor agreements, which are a contract between owners, builders, and union labor to reduce the cost of construction by having no strikes, reduced work rules, and in some cases we are getting wage reductions from the unions because they understand that the non-union entities are making a heavy dent into what has been basically their lock on construction. They've lost it in the boroughs. They see a little bit of that eroding in New York City, in Manhattan. So we are working with them to help them regain what they are losing. So we are trying to have them look at theirs as a business model as opposed to just strictly union labor. So it's together to move forward for construction. We see a bright future on residential, commercial office building, and certainly with the Cornell Technion project that we're involved in, we see a bright future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashok? Perfect.
Well, the times, they are a-changing. Arguably more relevant today than when Bob Dylan penned that stanza some 50 years ago. So just think about what's happened in the last 15 years. So the old phone as we know it has morphed into the smartphone. We all have one. GPS navigation has sort of made the paper map a thing of the past. And even in our business, 3D modeling and BIM will inevitably make the typical construction plans, 2D modeling and blueprints, a thing of the past. But what really hasn't changed in perhaps many decades is the way construction, design, development, and construction has been done. But that's about to change with a project in Brooklyn at Atlantic Yards, which is a high-rise residential building, which really is the bread and butter of residential development in urban areas and certainly in our city. And these 25 to 35-story buildings are, in fact, ones that address the urban density issues that we've talked about earlier today that we face in our city and, of course, in many cities throughout the world. So there are many drivers to this type of approach, or this different approach of construction and design. The economic turndown over the last 4 years has required developers to sort of rebalance their thinking with dwindling revenues and increased construction costs. Other urban issues such as logistics, pollution, density, waste disposal, etc., are also drivers for this new way of thinking. It's not a new technology. Modular prefab has been around for quite a while. It's proven, it has a track record, but it never had been applied, or never has been applied, to buildings of this scale. There are many enabling technologies that make this possible. Of course, there is 3D and BIM modeling that really make this type of approach very possible. The consequences are extremely desirable. Economic success through reduced first costs, earlier cost certainty for developers, and significant environmental benefits that come out of it, including some that I'll talk about in a moment. Other benefits, of course, include safer working conditions for construction workers, and improvement in construction and quality of finishes. And finally, there's also this incredible opportunity, I think, that exists for a new industry to really pop up and crop up in our fair city here. So some of the benefits, ease of quality control, safer jobs, safer work environment, reduced community impact. This is everything from crowded urban sites, pollution, etc. And it's certainly more sustainable because there's less waste generated. The air quality impact is greatly reduced. And the energy consumption in the entire construction process is also greatly reduced. The technical details are somewhat complex, but they're very logical. And with the technology that we have today, is quite easy to implement. So in summary, modular prefab approaches are certainly sustainable. There's no aesthetic compromise. So there's the perception that modular buildings tend to be very boxy and rectangular, orthogonal. That's not true at all. It responds to the pertinent issues that we have in our urban environments. It's certainly a game changer, I believe, for urban residential construction. And it has the opportunity to crop up a new industry in New York City. This has all come about through intense collaboration between Forest City Ratner, the developers, Sharp Architects, Excite Modular, who are modular consultants, and of course my firm, Arup. So watch out. This is a big game changer that's upon us. Thank you.
Thank you. And to make sense of all this, Paul.
What?
It's interesting because so many of us come back to history. What's striking about architecture and planning in New York City today is how much the values that are there resemble the values in the first half of the 20th century rather than the second half of the 20th century, and how much they need to continue to reflect those values for the future. Why is that? Well, the early to mid 20th century were New York City's time. It was young. It was growing, it offered opportunity for a better life. The public sector took advantage of this. It responded by providing the public realm, by building subways, by creating parks, and by expanding public services for a city that was growing and a population that needed it. Architecture responded by, and it did with a little help from the zoning, I might add, by providing space that not only had the right kind of form, but that announced both the arrival of New York City and its aspirations for greatness for the future. Now, the word iconic is terribly overused, but there is a wonderful picture, which I don't have, because I'm a lawyer and I don't have pictures, of Lower Manhattan. You've all seen it, the skyline of Lower Manhattan from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s with those wonderful skyscrapers growing up. That really said everything you could say about what New York City was and where it hoped it was going. Now, there were a lot of reasons why this was not the New York in the second half of the 20th century, but over the past generation, we've seen two important changes that have begun to bring us back, close the circle. The first is a resurrection of New York City as a place of opportunity, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is for a city to be a place of opportunity, because otherwise people don't come here. We need the jobs, we need the economy to make things happen. And the second half is the growth of a global and digital economy. The key players in this economy are younger cities from Asia, from the Middle East, and to a lesser extent, the older cities of Europe. But what's striking about all of them is how they've used architecture and engineering, buildings or structures, the London Eye, to announce their arrival and their importance on the world stage. As a result, we have a new appreciation for the value of density because, as you've heard, the best ideas come from people sitting together and talking to each other face to face, even in an economy with electronic communications. We also understand the importance of architecture in creating a functional workplace and making a statement. So what does this all mean for the future? All I could do is come up with some questions, really. What parts of our built history should be preserved, and what does preservation mean for the future use and evolution of those buildings? How can we induce the kind of construction, the kind of buildings that we need for the next generation? Is regulation alone sufficient to do that, or do we need other incentives? What's the best way to create infrastructure in a time when governments are really being starved for money? But we need the infrastructure both to support the more intense land uses and to maintain New York City's attractiveness as a place to live and work. And finally, how do we achieve all these goals in a way that's fair to all stakeholders, the people who live and work here, the people who build here, the people who own historic resources? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. That's great. We've left ourselves 2 minutes and 41 seconds for discussion. Okay, so that was terrific. I want to try to tie it together a little bit in terms of, I mean, Carol, you started with the proposition that New York is not dense enough. And it's interesting, in prepping for this, we had a debate on the panel phone call about whether people have actually accepted density, this idea that that is a good thing. Carol thinks no. I think Paul believed yes, that people did believe. So the interesting question that I really saw running through all of this is what this means as the city grows. And Carol's correct, Manhattan is dense. Outside of Manhattan, less dense than LA. Janno spoke about the importance of Brooklyn especially. And yet, if you think about the construction cost issues that were raised, and this notion of project labor agreements and the unions, that the real issue with outer borough development is that the construction costs are the same as Manhattan, but the revenues aren't there to match it. So given that, and what Ashok brought us about modular, I mean, is modular the answer? What's the answer to that fundamental question of creating these new places Paul spoke about for people to live and work, given our cost structure, our density, our aging infrastructure, and so forth?
Well, I think you're right. There need to be a change in some of the inputs that create the economic model. We have a very old office building stock right now in the city. It's, I think, 60% is more than 50 years old or something like that. And it's a problem for us to compete with other world cities. So how do you do that? You have to change the economics of building office buildings in New York City, both in Manhattan and in the outer boroughs, in the other boroughs rather. And how you do that is by, yes, you have to do some of the things that Jay's talking about, project labor agreements, and dealing with the cost of union construction, but we're also going to have to decide whether government is going to take leadership, as Schumer and the Group of 35 Commission recommended, in assembling sites and saying, this is a neighborhood on top of mass transit we want to develop for office buildings, office use, because it's important to the city's future. We need to do some things to change the economic model, or office buildings will not be built, and that ultimately is going to starve us in the competitive competition with other cities.
Yes, Carol?
I agree with that, but there are scales of development. And of course, you're doing at a different scale. Prefabrication requires an enormous scale for the economies of scale. But as I was trying to suggest, I don't think that is the nature of New York. In New York, well, particularly Manhattan, it's a single building on a single lot, and many multiple parcels on a block. And that is the essential nature of New York. And that won't change because there is this resident history, residue of history, landmarking or whatever, or just the difficulty of site assembly. So I think that I'm very much in agreement with Vishaan. I believe that what we need to do is focus on public space, on mass transit, good buildings with high vertical density, because that's a good way to concentrate around mass transit, and then to amplify the amenities of the public realm. And if we go back to the Park Avenue model and East Midtown rezoning, that the opportunity to leverage growth against an enhanced public space, I think, is the future of capital individual rebuilding of the city.
Paul, is our zoning up to the task?
I'm sorry, don't.
Is our zoning up to the task of what Carol just talked about delivering that public space, the infrastructure, the sort of robust public realm we need to support these new forms of living and working?
Well, it's, for the first question is, should zoning be, how far should zoning go in being responsible for providing that space? And I think that, it's tried. I think that East Midtown represents a further effort in that regard by creating a fund for creation of infrastructure. I think some of the requirements that are now imposed on development, subway station relocation and so on, are important. But I don't think, I think zoning can only do so much without, from an economic perspective, starting to create issues with the cost of construction and the cost of development. So I think we need to look at other mechanisms, maybe what they're doing over in Hudson Yards.
Just to follow up on that, Paul, one thing that I've noticed with the zoning resolution is we are starting to create these MX zones, which are these, it's absolutely antithetical to where zoning began, which was segregating uses to mix up uses, because this gets to this question of, is our whole notion of an office building somewhat obsolete? I mean, I'm taking my students to Rotterdam at the end of the month because on the waterfront there, they've created this extraordinary mix of housing and workspaces and so forth, and yet, for as much as we talk about mixed use, whether we're talking about Park Avenue or if you look along the Brooklyn waterfront, we have a number of mono-use buildings going up. And is that really the future? I mean, would modular change that? Would the way we build buildings change that? What's the key ingredient there? Or is that not the issue?
Well, I think that the mixed-use development is certainly the one that is very desirable, because you create these sort of live, work, recreate type zones, and it certainly improves quality of life. The issue with modular, though, is that we think that we've solved the issues, the technical issues, as they relate to residential construction, and by extension, things like hotels. But office buildings are a different animal. And it's going to take a little time to figure all that out, but it will. We will crack the code there for sure. And I think then that becomes a real game changer, not just for residential construction, but almost all construction in urban areas.
Okay, terrific. I think we have to end on that, but I wanted to thank the panel. It's a great set of talks, and I wanted to thank very much Vin and his team at MAS and Jeannie for putting together this amazing event. Thanks so much.